I like talking about this. I like imagining in my mind, because anything you believe is true in your mind, right? Identity protective cognition. In my mind, what I believe is that when the kosher law was handed down to Jewish people thousands of years ago, and it basically instructed them to do not eat pork, do not eat shellfish. What I believe is that that was to protect them health-wise. It was telling them, and all the other stuff it says not to eat, it's bottom feeder animals, lower on the food chain. Ultimately, what I believe is in that religious law, ultimately, they were being told, eat these things because they're healthier. If it were modern day kosher law, it'd be like, yeah, don't eat fast food, don't drink soda. Like it would say all those things. But for the time, they were able to figure it out, well, if it's a animal on the bottom feeder of the food chain and or maybe a predator, that sort of thing, they're not as good for you. You won't be able to digest them and get as much nutrition from them. That's what I believe kosher law is ultimately about. People want to say, oh, it was because that was their way to identify with being obedient to God. Okay, yeah, but ultimately it was addressing a physical issue. That's what I believe. Now that we've established that though, specifically, I believe, because a lot of people argue this, I have to say this, I believe there is a such thing as Jewish DNA. Despite all the confusion in DNA tests, I believe that I can look at a person who is Jewish, of Hebrew descent, and a person who is not, and I can usually, without even knowing that either of them is Jewish, I can sense it, I can see it, I can see certain traits that they are of Jewish descent, whereas that person's not. Okay? I believe Jewish DNA exists, and I understand that being Jewish is a religion. I understand that, but I'm also understanding, I know, that Jewish DNA exists. So when I say Jewish, that's often really what I'm talking about here, because this is a channel about DNA test results. With that being said, what I believe is that that law was handed to people who were ethnically Jewish, as I am on my mother's side, as her test confirmed, so I would fall into this category. I believe that if you have Jewish DNA, you're more likely to have issues eating shellfish and or pork, but specifically shellfish. And when the law was given to that group of ethnically similar people, they specifically couldn't handle it. In the same way, let me give another example. African American people are more likely to have sickle cell anemia, or whatever it's called, sickle cell, whatever it is. I don't know anything about it. Okay? So that certain diseases and afflictions affect certain ethnic backgrounds of people. We know that. We're not going to deny that, right? What I'm proposing is that if you're Jewish, ethnically, whether you're atheist or not, your DNA test and all your culture and all your tradition goes back to being Jewish in that sense, that you're more likely to have allergies to shellfish. And compare that to someone who is not. Compare that to someone who is in Norway and is a fisherman and eats all kinds of fish and bottom feeders too. You can be whatever ethnicity you want to be for this example, as long as you're not Jewish in it. And the point is, you eat a lot of shellfish, shrimp, scallops. You eat it all day long. Japanese, let's go with Japanese. You take a DNA test, it confirms you're 100% Japanese. You've got no Jewish DNA at all. And you eat a lot of things that are not kosher, including shrimp and scallops and lobster and eel. Eel's not kosher either. Eel. And you're fine. You don't have any reactions to shellfish and those unkosher things that you're not supposed to eat. Okay? Compare that Japanese person to the Jewish person. The Jewish person's more likely to have an allergic reaction to shellfish. That's what I'm proposing. That's what I believe. I believe specifically Jewish people were not supposed to eat it. Now granted, I'm not saying that it's a good idea for anyone to eat a bunch of shellfish. It's got a lot of cholesterol in it, for example. But I think ethnically, we're all conditioned in certain ways where certain things will bother us more physically. And I think Jewish people are less likely to be able to tolerate shellfish. And that's ultimately why that law was given to them. With all that being said, I've been kosher for over a decade now. and I had dyshydrotic eczema. My hands were basically just all blisters. And so I don't eat shellfish. I don't even eat tuna. I don't eat catfish. I don't eat tilapia. And I have to really also watch my sugar intake too. Otherwise, the blisters will start back. So for me, and again, my mom's DNA test confirms it's in our lineage. So, is it a coincidence? Or am I just making all this thing up? Could it be that the reason Jewish people were handed that law is because they, ethnically, were less likely to be able to process and digest shellfish, whereas people in Africa or China easily could. So for Jewish people specifically, it's a burden. For the rest of people, it's not. One way we could explore this is for Jewish people that have tried shellfish. Did it cause any kind of reaction to you? I'd like to also hear from people who are allergic to shellfish, have taken a DNA test and confirmed there's absolutely no Jewish DNA in there. See, these are things I'd like to hear. This would help me. This would help you either reinforce or completely break down my theory. Your comments, your truth, your wisdom, your facts. F-A-C-T-S, not F-A-X. Your facts, your comments are right here.